McElroy from Men's Performance Consulting here. I'm going to go through the video for this week. So welcome to a very miserable Tuesday, Anzac Day Tuesday evening. Pretty ordinary day in Melbourne, not sure where you guys are tuning in from, but yeah, not the best day here. So keep dry, keep warm. So I'm just going to go through some basics about training programs, alright? So there is a little bit to cover, but I'm going to keep it fairly standard, fairly basic, and just get you guys to understand the basics behind training and periodization, so you can go off and use it in your own training and implement it that way. So everything I go by is the Sportive Principle, alright? Everything to do with training periodization, that's pretty much all you need to know. And Sportive stands for, the S is for specificity. Excuse my handwriting. So specificity just means that you want to train specifically for your sport. So if you are a endurance cyclist, then you want to go out and ride your bike. You don't want to go and throw javelins. Yeah, makes sense. Likewise, if you are a multi-stage race cyclist, 100k after 100k after 100k for a week, Tour de France, etc., then your training should reflect that, as opposed to a crit racer who is obviously doing an hour crit race, something like that, with lots of short, sharp, high intense bursts with a recovery, very technical skills required there. So you want to be as specific as you possibly can to your sport. P and O is progressive overload. Progressive overload. All that means is that in your training, each week you want to progressively overload the body, yeah? Progressively get harder and harder each week. If you train the same, you remain the same. That's pretty stock standard. And what a training program should look like, I'm not going to say what it should look like because there's a lot of ways you can do it, but the traditional style of progressive overload is to to increase your load by 2 to 10% per week. Now what load is, it is a combination of time, intensity, and frequency. Okay, so time times by intensity times by frequency equals load. Right? Time is obviously number of minutes you're training. That's the volume that you're doing. Whether you're doing 60 minutes or 120 minutes or 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, etc. Intensity is generally, it's obviously how hard you're going. It can be measured in a lot of ways. A rating of perceived exertion between 1 to 10 is fine, and that's actually how I do most of my stuff. You can do training stress scores and that sort of thing, where 100 equals, or training stress score of 100 equals 1 hour at threshold. But I find a rating of perceived exertion scale works fine, with 3 to 4 being your zone 2 endurance work, so long, slow, continuous training. 6 to 7 is generally your threshold, sometimes 8. And then your 9 to 9.5 is your VO2 max intervals, and your 10 out of 10 is your anaerobic work there. So the challenge there is to find your training zones first and foremost. Obviously VO2 max test, etc. is the best way to do it. There are some field tests that we can go through later on which give you a very good idea as well. But once you've got your zones, then you can just correlate that up to a rating of perceived exertion, and that's how you figure out the intensity of that session. And then obviously frequency as well. Okay, so if you do 60 minutes a day at a workload of 3 out of 10, so you're just doing your long, slow, continuous training, that is going to be a load of 180 arbitrary units. 60 times by 3 equals 180, and if you do that 3 times a week, so 540 arbitrary units of load. So that's your weekly load. So if we have scale here is, so loads up here, number of weeks is down here. Okay, base week, second week, third week, etc. 10 weeks, load over here. So let's say that 540 units of load, that's our first week, 1 week at that. So out of this 540, we need to vary these factors, your time, your intensity, or your frequency, to increase this 540 by 2 to 10%, all right? Depending on your sport, 2% for a runner, like that's heaps. That's actually a lot of overload because it's obviously very stressful on the body. Cyclists, Triathlete swimmers, you know, maybe you can go close to 5, 6, some guys can do 10%. There are training methods, or periodization methods where you can actually increase it by sort of 25, 30% in 1 week, and then just reduce it for the next 3. So let's just stick to the traditional model. This is what works for 95% of people. So what you want to do is you want to increase one of these. So if we increase the time by 10%, that'd be 66 minutes times by a 3 out of 10. That's going to increase that 180 by 10% because we've increased the time by 10%. So the theory is that we go 1 week, the next week we go up by 10%, or 2 to 10%. Next week we go up again, 2 to 10%. And then the 4th week, so 1, 2, 3, 4th week we reduce the load by 25%, okay? And the reason why we reduce the load is because we are accumulating fatigue. We're fine, we're fatiguing, we've become quite fatigued by the end of that 3-week period. It doesn't have to be 3 weeks, it can be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, up to 6 weeks is fine. But you become fatigued at the end of this cycle, so we need to reduce the load to allow the body to recover, and what we call supercompensate. Supercompensation is when the body, it responds to the stimulus. We've got the stimulus, we've got the fatiguing stimulus, we're temporarily overtraining basically, but then we recover and the tissues and the tendons, etc., all get stronger, better, faster, and we improve our performance that way. You will not improve if you do not recover. That is a fact. The body needs time to adapt. So we reduce the load. What we don't do is reduce the intensity. We actually keep the intensity the exact same for that unloading week. So we need to reduce the 25% through either decreasing the time or decreasing the frequency. So you could drop a session and that would work out to be 25%, yeah? We could just take this 60 minutes 3 times a week, we could just reduce that by 25%, so we could do 45 minutes at a intensity of 3 for however times we do that for the session, right? Do not change intensity. Intensity stays the same. Same with a taper. When you are leading into a race, you do not change that intensity. If you reduce the intensity, you will lose fitness in that week. I guarantee you will lose fitness. And the science is it's super supportive of this. You need to keep the intensity the same. After that, we go back to the 3rd week and we increase that by 2 to 10%. So up we go again, 1, 2, up again, and then we reduce it by 25% again. All right. So as you can see, the general trend is up with a couple of down recovery stages in between. The way performance works, I'll do it in green. Performance in the green here. We start off good, performance is good. We start to fatigue by that 3rd week, but then we have this deload week, so we recover and go again. Again, it's up to fatigue, deload week, so we recover again. If we don't have this deload week or we don't recover, performance is just going to, you need fatigue, you're not going to recover, and you're going to come back to baseline. You're going to do more training because you say, oh no, I'm not getting fitter, so I need to do more work, whereas in essence, you're actually just fatigued, you're not recovering optimally. So you need to manipulate time, frequency, intensity to increase 2 to 10% per week. If you go more than that, you risk injury, illness, etc. Some guys can do it. I don't recommend it. Out of the survey that we filled out a couple of days ago, I reckon about 60 to 75% of people were saying that their main frustration was that they're getting injured. And you're getting injured because we're not recovering, or we're doing too much volume, or we're doing too much load in general, and the body's not adapting. All right? The last one to go over is reversibility, which is this R here. All this is saying is that if you stop training, you will get a reversal in adaptation. So if you get fit and you stop training, you will lose your fitness. Okay. Look back on the previous video we did about off-season recovery, because you do lose it, but you can get it back as well. So don't stress too much. But yeah, use it or lose it basically. So that was just a quick overview. This math can get a little bit confusing, but all you need to do is map out how long are you training. Do it for a week. How long are you training each session? The average intensity of that session, if it's a long, slow, endurance, ride, run, swim, whatever, it's a 3 to 4. Threshold is generally 6 to 7 or 8. VO2 max is sort of 9, 9.5, and anaerobic is above that, all right? Figure out your zones, get this down, how much time, how much intensity, how much frequency, figure out what that load number is, and just increase that bit by bit each week, 2 to 10% for the first 3, reduce that load by 25% in the 4th week while keeping intensity the same, and then go up 2 to 10% again You just keep doing that. You can break it down into more specific cycles where you do like a 1 4-week block is a mesocycle, we call it. A microcycle is 1 week. A mesocycle is a block of training, so 4 weeks, etc. Or it could be 4 weeks, could be 6 weeks, etc. And then we've got a macro cycle, which is like a whole year plan, which is made up of lots of these blocks. I hope that makes sense. This was just a quick video. I could be talking hours and hours about this, but this is the basics. Follow these main principles and you should see improvements. So any questions, leave them below and we'll revisit this topic in more detail in a later video. Thanks guys.